I'm James Helder. Welcome to Full Court Football 24. Quite privileged to be joined by Salt Dean, Millwall, Sheffield United, Crystal Palace, Wellington Phoenix, Team Wellington, Hawke's Bay United, Tasman United, and Hawks United star. None other than Paul Ifill. How are you, mate?
All right, how are you?
Yeah, good. I forgot Barbados International as well. I think that's a very good maker to have in the title. How are you, mate?
I'm good. Yeah, not too bad. It's early in the morning here. Just about to attack my day, so pleased to be joining you.
Indeed. For those that don't know, you're in sunny New Zealand at the moment, so I hope everything's okay where you are and not too much of a panic cause with everything going on.
No, we're going quite well. We've only got one active case left in the whole country, so we've had no more cases for the last 8 days, I think. So we're close. We're pretty close. We're out of lockdown, and things are getting back to normal. So we've been quite fortunate that the Prime Minister here went pretty early and has managed to get it under control.
Glad to hear it. We're going to look back a little bit on your career journey today, a little bit about your life, your upbringing, and the success you've had on the field, which I've got to say, looking at your career and doing the research, you've had a fantastic journey. I'd like to start right back at the early years of that. So a little bit about your upbringing. I know you're from Brighton. Is that where you grew up as a child and stuff?
Yeah, so just outside of Brighton, a little village called Woodingdean. That's what obviously led me to Saltdean, which is another village just around the corner. Pretty average upbringing. My father was probably the only black fella in the whole village. Myself and my sister were probably the only two kids of colour, I suppose. So quite a bit of bullying, if I'm honest, as a kid. And I think that kind of went away when it was clear that I was quite good at sport. And I think when you're playing sport, it doesn't matter if the kids are bullies; they want the best players on their team. So I think that was what led to the bullying sort of subsiding a little bit, probably at the age of sort of 11 or 12. But I had to deal with quite a bit, in the early days, which was pretty hard. But it gives you that resilience, I suppose. And I'm just thinking back, we probably didn't have too much, but mum worked hard. Mum had 2-3 jobs at times, and dad was out of work quite often, sort of in work, then he'd be out of work. So when he was in work, we'd feel quite rich, My pocket money would be £3 a week, and then the following week, dad would lose his job, and my pocket money would be down to 50p. So it was a bit of a roller coaster. But mum always worked hard. She had 2 or 3 jobs all the time, and she kept the family sort of together, really. So although we certainly weren't rich, I wouldn't say we were destitute. We were somewhere in between. So pretty happy household, to be honest. And I look back quite fondly on my time growing up in Woodingdean, to be honest.
Was there an age growing up where you knew you were like significantly better at football than some of your friends? Did you stand out at the sport from a very early age, or was it something that you worked at to get better at?
I definitely worked at it to get better, but I think probably I started sort of playing at about 9, in small teams, local clubs, stuff like that, and I could always dribble, and I loved dribbling. That was just the thing that made me happy. So I would go and practice my dribbling because I was good at it. Naturally, I'd go and practice it more and more and more. And it's funny, I look back now and I'm talking to the kids that I've got in my academy, which we'll probably go on to later, but I'm trying to get them to find the love of the ball at an early age. That's the main thing. And I don't think today kids can do what we did because there's so many things getting in the way. I'd get home from school at 10 years old. Mum was still at work. So I'd make myself maybe a bit of toast at 3:15, and then I'd go out and play football on my own till 6 o'clock, till she was home. She'd make dinner. Then I'd go back out till it was dark. Then she'd call me in. I'd go to bed, and it was rinse and repeat. And if there was mates around, we'd play 1v1. If there was 4 of us, we'd play 2v2. You know what it's like. You just keep going. But it didn't mean if there weren't anybody around, I wouldn't go and practice. I'd just go and practice. But I didn't see it as practice. I was just playing. I was just having fun. I was doing my kick-ups. And I look now and I think, blimey, I got a hell of a lot of time in practicing without even realising what I was actually doing. I didn't need an academy. I suppose I had my own little academy at the bottom of my road, just having a bit of fun, trying to edit off lampposts, trying to edit off road signs and stuff like that. And you learn as you go along. And we didn't have I couldn't go online. We didn't have the internet like we do these days. I couldn't look at so and so playing football. I couldn't look at the next best drill this week or next week. So you just find your own way, and I think that creativity comes from that. And it's a bit of I suppose I took that into my football because I didn't start any academy stuff till I was about 15. And by the time I got there, you know, some of these kids have been in the academy system from 8, 9 years old. And I was bringing a playground type of feel to it. And a lot of coaches at the start certainly tried to coach that out of me.
What sort of players would you have looked up to at 9, 10 years old? When you're in the playground, whose name would you have been calling out?
When I was really, really young, I remember coming through and we used to play at the local green. And I don't know why, I love Nigel Spink. And I used to play in goal quite a bit. I'd be Nigel Spink. He'd won the European Cup, you know, on debut, which is just ridiculous. So I was him often. As I got a little older, I loved the likes of Alan Shearer, old school centre forward. You know, I wanted to be a goal scorer. Wanted to be a number 9. Ian Wright, loved Ian Wright. Guys like that, really. Quite privileged and lucky to grow up in a time when it felt like there were just legends everywhere. You know, every single team had a guy, had a go-to guy. You know, Paul Gascoigne growing up, Chris Waddle. It was just such a good time to be watching football. And when you've got guys like that who went on to do what they did, you dream of emulating that. Obviously, I didn't quite reach those heights, but it was nice to be able to watch that, you know, whether it was match of the day or you might get a game a week. We didn't have Sky back in those days. So trying to watch live football was very different.
Who would you say was a standout influence for you in football? So someone that really took the time to help you nurture your talents or really noticed that you had ability at that age?
I think I couldn't pick one person. It's funny because I see it today when I work in the academy, and you've got academies and they claim a player like they're the only person that has ever helped that player, and it's rubbish, you know. And I really try not to do it. I look back and probably the best coach I ever had was my dad, because my dad taught me how to pass. He taught me how to shoot. He taught me how to tackle. Well, not tackle. I didn't tackle too much, but he taught me all the fundamentals. And then from there, I then went about my own business and did my own thing. But along the journey, I suppose, into becoming a pro, there was 5, 6, 7 coaches that took me under their wing and realised I had a little something, and sort of layered on top. You know, okay, he's quite good at this, but he can't do this. Let's add that to his game. And I think you've got to look at it like that. The best coaches don't try and change you; they try and add. They try and add to your game, and then try and sort of hide your weaknesses. If you can work on your weaknesses, great. If we can't, don't spend too much time worrying about it. Let's try and hide them and actually make sure that you can do this even better. So a lot of guys that you wouldn't particularly know of, but guys that I still speak to today, old school teachers, local club legends, you know, guys that have been at clubs for 20 odd years, never get the credit they deserve, and are still there now.
I know you spent time at the Watford Academy. Before we get into that period of your life, was you playing sort of regional football? So you'd be playing for your district team, your borough team, before you got scouted for Watford. How did that process and period work?
Yeah, so I think at 11 it was the first time you got a chance to basically train or try and get into your district team. So for me it was Brighton Boys, and I got into Brighton Boys at 11 years old with a load of my friends, and thought I was on the pathway to the next level, which would have been in Sussex. So you represent Brighton, you do well for them, you represent Sussex, then you go and play against, you know, Surrey, Middlesex, Kent, blah, blah, blah. And you come up against all those teams, and it's all the London boys, and it's just another level. And we weren't really ready for that. So I got into Brighton. Then I got into Sussex. And I think at about 13, the Sussex manager said to me, look, you're too small. I don't think you're ever going to be able to play at this level. So they let me go. I was absolutely devastated. Went back to playing for Brighton, did okay for Brighton for a couple of years. And it wasn't until I got to 15 that the Sussex manager came to watch one of the Brighton games, and he pulled me aside afterwards and he said, blimey, you've grown, you look a completely different player, you know, I'd like to have you back in. And I was a little bit pissed off, really. I thought, you know, not much has changed. It's probably that he saw something different on that particular day. But I think a lot of kids go by the wayside because of the way that you're treated by adults. And there must be a better way to, you know, let people down. I think sometimes that they don't realise that one little conversation, one little sentence or paragraph can actually change the way a kid thinks. It's really important. And luckily, I was always the sort of kid that whenever I was told something that I didn't like to hear, I'd sulk, go away. I'd probably decide I was going to quit. I'd quit for a few days. and then I'd normally sit down and speak to mum, and she'd give me a little bit of a pep talk, and then I'd go back out and try and prove people wrong. And that kind of stood me in good stead, you know, all the way through, even to now at 40 years old. I still feel like I'm doing that, trying to prove myself to people.
Can you talk me through that day that you got scouted for Watford and you was invited to join their academy or trial for their academy? Can you talk me through that time on reflection?
Yeah, so I always, as I was growing up, I was doing well in, you know, my local team, whether it was Saltdean or I played for another team called Bridgeview, and it got to the stage where when the scouts were coming, they'd let me know before, and I'd go out and play when the scouts were there, and I'd be awful because I'd be trying way too hard. So in the end, they decided, look, we just won't tell him. We won't tell him. Let him play his natural game, and that's what actually led to me getting trials, because the scouts would come, I'd be going out, and it was like I was back in the playground again. I was just enjoying myself, you know, having a bit of fun. And I always had sort of raw ability, but it wasn't probably what the pro scouts wanted. You know, they want a polished player, and I certainly wasn't polished. And I used to try and dribble people, and they probably thought that there's something there, but we're going to need to coach this out of him. So quite a few times that happened, and then Watford said to me, look, come up, we want you to play in a friendly game. And I went up there, played quite well, and they said, look, we want you, but obviously we're not going to move you up or anything. We'll leave you to do your schooling back in Brighton, but you'll come up during the season, maybe every week or every other week. So it was probably every other week. I had my first season, I think I was 14. I had a very good season. Got 11 goals in 9 games. I was playing in a team with the likes of Gift and Noel Williams. Trying to think who else would have been there then. David Perpetuini, James Panay, a lot of guys who went on to play, you know, at least championship football. So we had a good side. Things were going well. At the end of the season, they sat me down and said, look, we want you back for next year. So I started going back, and sort of the middle of that season, I think I'd scored 9 goals in my first 7, and they got a new director of football. It was just when sort of director of youth football was coming into play. You know, some clubs were doing it, some clubs weren't. This youth director of football had seen me play once. He pulled me after the game and he said, okay, we think, you know, it's a bit much for you to be coming up and back every week, and we'll give you a call when we want you back in next. And I didn't realise at 14, 15 that was sort of like, see you later. And obviously I'm in the car on the way home, and my dad had to explain to me that it was a sort of, you know, we'll call you, don't call us. So basically you're gone. So that was that. I ended up joining Brighton's academy for a little while. But at the time, I mean, Brighton wasn't what it is now. It was a lower league club. I'd been going probably about 8 months with a couple of my friends. And one of the coaches said, son, go and do this or go and do that. And I said, I'm not your son. You're not my dad. And he said, I'll call everybody son. And I said, you don't know my name. I said, I've been coming here 8 months and you don't know my name. And he said, of course I do, son. I said, what's my name? And he couldn't tell me my name. And I went home that night and I said to my mum, I've been going here 8 months and the coach doesn't even know my name. So really, are we just putting money in their pockets? You know, what am I doing here? So myself and 2 of my mates ended up leaving. One of the other lads ended up becoming a golf pro, and the other lads ended up becoming a rugby pro. So the 3 of us leaving at that time was perfect. I mean, it was pretty daunting at the time, leaving a professional football club, especially the closest one. We all supported Brighton as well, so it was a bit of upheaval. But we left. I went and played for Saltdean. Obviously, those 2 went off and did their thing. And it was only probably about maybe 6 months after that a guy called Dennis Burnett, who used to play for Millwall, used to play for a number of different clubs, very good player. He took me under his wing at Saltdean and just said, look, I think you're capable of playing at the next level. So he got me a trial at West Ham. So I went up to West Ham. We played a friendly game. We were me and my friend, a friend of mine called Carl Southwell. We played up front together for West Ham. We were 6-0 up at half time. He'd scored a hat trick. I'd scored a hat trick. So I thought, like, we've done enough. You know, we're a real chance of getting signed here. Game finished. They pulled us in the meeting room and said, look, they said to my mate, you're not quite what we're looking for, after he'd scored a hat trick, which was pretty devastating for him. And they said to me, look, we want to have one more look at you. So we want you to come up next week. We've got a friendly against Leyton Orient. Came up the next week. I scored again. I remember getting the ball in my own half, beat 4 men, scored. I remember in the game thinking, like, there's no way they can't take me. Hat trick last week, goal this week. I played well. And they pulled me afterwards and said, look, you're not better than what we've got. And at the time, I couldn't believe it, but I've since looked at the list of players who played that day: Frank Lampard, Rio Ferdinand, Joe Cole,
Wayne Defoe.
Jermaine Defoe might have been there. Like the squad was ridiculous. I mean, I go around doing talks on this now, and I think Michael Carrick was another one. I mean, you're talking about 500 England caps between four or five players. So what they said was absolutely right. But me being a 15, 16-year-old kid, I went away absolutely devastated. I couldn't have done more in that trial. It was two of the best trials I'd ever had. So I went back to Saltdean, carried on playing a bit of men's football. But then he said to me, look, because he came and watched both trials, he said, look, there is somewhere that you're going to fit. Definitely. You're good enough. You've proved that you're as good, maybe not better than what they've got, but you're as good. So we'll find something else for you. So at that point, again, went away, had a little sulk, decided I wanted to quit, spoke to mum, got back into it. And then it was a case of, right, how do I find my way back into professional football? I really enjoyed that little taste of it and thought I could potentially do it. So I just started scoring goals for Saltdean. And because I was scoring goals for a men's team, I was the youngest in the team at 16. Scouts then started coming as well. So it was a bit of scouts turning up. It was a bit of Dennis working his magic, trying to get me into clubs. So I had a phone call from a scout at Portsmouth. I had a phone call from a scout at Millwall and one from Newcastle. Now, I've always supported Newcastle. As a kid, I supported Newcastle. So that was it for me. I was like, right, I'm going to go and play for Newcastle. This is the one. So the first trial was Portsmouth. So my dad drove me all the way down to Portsmouth. This is before mobile phones. We get to Portsmouth ground. It's really quiet. We were a bit early. I'm thinking, this is odd that there's no one in the car park. So I go and knock on the groundsman's hut, and I'm like, what's going on? What's going on the games day? He said, sorry, son. Obviously, nobody's give you a call. The game's off. So we were in Brighton. We drove all the way to Portsmouth. So we drive all the way home, and I'm obviously devastated on the way home. And got home, but luckily 2 days later, Millwall called me. So they said, we want you to come up. We want you to play in a reserve game. So I don't know what a reserve game standard would be like. I'm okay. Yep, no problem. So I agree to it. Get ready. Go up there with. At the time, I think again, Dad was just trying to get back into work, and he had an interview in London, so he was going to meet me up there. So the chairman of Saltdean, a guy called Mark Stevens, lovely fella, he drove me up. So we're driving up there, and I'm not well prepared. I don't know what you're supposed to eat before games. So he said, "Do you want something to eat before the game?" So we stop at a service station, and I have like a can of Coke and a Mars bar as my pre-match for a bloody professional reserve game. So get to the game, just meet the boys, and we're playing Crystal Palace. So there I am, 16 years old, playing Palace. On the other side, they've got Bruce Dyer, who'd just become the first £1 million teenager. So he's playing, like their team was ridiculous. So I go out, I'm playing in this game, and I'm so far out of my depth, it's frightening. Every time I get the ball, I lose it. I'm getting knocked off the ball. I'm just not strong enough. And as a 16-year-old playing at Saltdean, I was known to be very, very quick. And even that's not really standing me in good stead. And I'm just thinking, bloody hell, they've chucked me in here. And if you could imagine the worst trial ever, this was it. I was shocking. And then I've been playing as a number 9 on the day, and the two centre halves were having a field day, having a great time. And last minute of the game, the centre half underhit a back pass from the halfway line, and it was bang. I was through. I was on goal. I was like, this is my moment. So I'm running through, but it's one of them times where you've got so long to think about what you're going to do. So I'm running from the halfway, and I've left them. So I'm thinking, shit, I'm going to lob him. No. I'm going to go round him. No, I'm going to slide it under him. All these things going through my head. And then just as I get there to strike the ball, I'm just sort of on the edge of the box. I think, sod it. I'm just going to whack it as hard as I can. So leg goes back to hit it as hard as I can. It takes the tiniest little bobbles up. I miss the ball, fall over. I've got grass all over my face, dirt in my teeth. Centre back runs back round, picks up the ball, runs off. Referee blows whistle. That's the end of the game. So I go in, get changed, go up to the chairman's lounge or the players' lounge or whatever. My dad's up there, so I see my dad as I walk through, and he stood there with the chief scout, one of the chief executives, Mark Stevens, who was the chairman of the club. And you can see Mark and my dad are looking at me as if to say, "Oh, you've messed this one up, son." And my dad sort of just puts his arms out. And he's not the sort of guy who gives hugs, He's a Caribbean dad, and he's pretty disciplined. So, but he put his arms out as if to say, "Unlucky son." So hugged him. Had a quick chat with them. They said, "How do you think you went?" I said, "Look, I'm not ready for that. I'm so far out of my depth. This, it was too much for me. Blah 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 blah." So they said, "Okay, yeah, we agree with most of what you said there, but we'd like to offer you a year's apprentice." And I said, I actually don't understand why you're going to give me a year. I said, that was awful. He said, "Look, we need to do our homework. we've been watching you over the last few weeks. Little did you know," he said, "there was a game when I was playing for Saltdean, and I heard that scouts were coming, and the gaffer actually dropped me, and I was fuming. And I went out while he was doing his team talk with a couple of my mates, and they were crossing balls into me, and I was hitting volleys. The scouts were sat behind the goal, watching me, and because I was so pissed off, everything I hit was just going in. Like, I was just angry. So I was hitting left foot, right foot. They were flying in top corners everywhere, and I thought nothing of it. I came on as sub in that game, played 10 minutes, didn't play very well, and that was that. But they'd actually been watching me for that half an hour spell, and honestly, everything I hit just went in. So they said, "Look, we know what you can and can't do. You know, you've got 2 feet. You're confident on both. Blah 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 blah. We've seen you in your own environment. What we wanted to do is take you out of your environment, put you in an environment where you weren't ready, and see how you reacted." And they said, every time you gave the ball away, you got back up and you chased it back down. You'd win it again, and then you give it away again. But we can work on that. They said, every time you got knocked down, you dusted yourself down and got back up and got back on with it. So they said, what we need at Millwall are players that have got the right mindset. If you're willing to work hard, we can actually coach you the rest. And we've seen that you can do that. So we want to give you a year's contract. We'll teach you that during that year in the youth team. And then hopefully by the end of that year, we'll be talking about professional contracts. And I remember driving home in the car, and I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that people would think that way. You know, I'd always seen it as though you had to be ready right now. And if you're not ready right now, you're never going to get anything. But for them to sort of be, I suppose, investing in my potential, I felt so happy. So I went back home, sat down with mum and dad. They said, "Look, you know, you've got to take this." But in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, shit, I want to go and do my trial at Newcastle. Like, I support Newcastle. They were in the Premier League at the time. And that actually talked me out of going and turning the contract down with Millwall and just taking the trial. They said, "Look, you've got a contract right here, and you've got a trial on the other hand. What happens if you go and trial badly and they don't look at your potential? Take the the offer at hand." So I took it and never looked back, to be honest.
Great bit of scouting by Millwall. I've got to say, Mick Beard, I think the chief scout was at the time. Found a few players on the way.
Yeah, no, it was Mick Beard and a guy called Bob Pearson. And Bob was unbelievable. I mean, I turn up at Millwall and you got Stephen Reid, and on the same day I turn up, you got Tim Cahill coming. I didn't know what he'd go on to do, but you've got Tim Cahill. You've got a guy called Richard Sadler, who was actually better than all of us and ended up getting injured, but he'd have done unbelievable in the game. He signed Neil Harris, who became the all-time top goal scorer. I think he signed him for 25 grand from Cambridge City. So it's, Bob and Beardy and the whole scouting network at the time was excellent, but it had to be excellent because the club had no money. So they had to find the sort of hidden gems in the non-league or the young boys coming through. And it stood them in good stead for years.
Explain to me joining Millwall as a player, that period, the first year, obviously you're doing YTS. So you're cleaning boots. You're cleaning boots for the first time.
Cleaning, but Nigel Spink's boots. What about that? So I'd been Nigel Spink on the green, and I'm cleaning Nigel Spink's boots and Tony Witter. So Tony Witter had come from QPR, centre back, lightning quick. So I was doing those two. To be fair, Spinky was so tight. He never used to give me a bonus. He'd hardly say hello. He was crap, actually. Good keeper. And I ended up playing with him the following year. But Tony Witter, absolute legend. So he pulled me aside. He found out that I was assigned to his boots, so he pulled me aside. He said, "All right, what's your name?" And we met and blah blah blah. He said, "What position do you play?" I said, "Oh, I've been a centre forward. I'm open to play centre forward in the youth team." He said, "All right, I'll do you a deal." He said, "I'll pay you £5 every goal you score." And he said, "If you score a hat trick, I'll give you £50 bonus." So I'm like, bloody hell, you can't really argue with that. And that year, I was the top scorer in the youth team, top scorer in the reserves. So he was paying me every week. So that was more money normally than my actual wages. I think I was on £42.50 a week as a YT. So you're cleaning boots, you're cleaning changing rooms, you're cleaning toilets. It's, they don't do it these days. I say it's brilliant, I think. But, for us as a grounding tool, it was absolutely brilliant. So all you wanted to do was get from your dressing room, the youth dressing room, into the pro dressing room. So you do whatever it took. And if that meant cleaning boots, if it meant doing whatever they asked you to do, you do it. And you really looked up to these guys. And to be fair to them, they did look after us, and they taught us the right ways and how to be a Millwall type player, a Millwall type person.
As well documented in the era, the initiations for young players, the way, like you said, young players were broken in to the team, into the shenanigans and antics. Can you give us a little insight into how things were for you coming through?
You know, it was hard enough in the youth team. Forgetting the first team, you come into the youth team. I'm a kid from Brighton. All these kids are from Surrey, from Kent, from London, and a lot of them are street kids who don't take any shit, you know. And I'm from little old Brighton, and I'm up there, and they're taking the piss out of my accent and the way I dress, and it was difficult. And you've got guys, you know, Stephen Reid, for instance, he'd just been called up to the England under-16s. So, you know, he's a big hitter in our dressing room. He's the top man, you know. And
What a great player.
Unbelievable player, lovely fella. But we just didn't get on from the start. And it's funny because we've been chatting over the lockdown and doing a bit of this sort of this and that, and we had a chat about it. And I said, you know, what was the issue? And he said, I just saw you as a threat. He said, I thought you were a good player. And he said, you know, someone comes in, they've got to prove themselves, and that's how the dressing room was. So you had to prove yourself as a youth team player first before you even thought about getting into the senior dressing room, and it was difficult, but. After a couple of months, they realised that I wasn't going away, and that I was a hard worker, and that I'd give all for the team, and all I wanted to do was just, you know, be there and be one of them. And once they realised that, I think they sort of took me in, and we had a really good togetherness. But you know, you talk about initiations. Most of that would be the next level up when you get into the pro dressing room, and then you know, your first trip away, you're asked to sing, and if you don't sing, you've got to pay a fine, or you know, there was all sorts of stuff going on that I think now. A lot of the senior pros would be chucked out the game for bullying. Like people were getting locked in skips,
Really?
chucked out on the middle of the road. Yeah, no, there was all sorts of madness going on. I think now with social media, you know, one click of a camera, one video out there, blimey, we'd be in all sorts of trouble. And it follows on. All the stuff that the senior pros did to us younger fellas, 2-3 years later, we'd be doing it to the next lot of younger fellas, and so on and so forth. And the pranks would get bigger, and the jokes would be bigger, and that's just how it goes.
We had the pleasure of having Stephen Reid on the channel. He gave us a great insight and a great feel for that era. And the club in particular, fantastic FA Cup run while you was there as well. Would you say that was one of your main highlights while playing for Millwall?
The whole time at Millwall was a highlight. Like I was so fortunate to go into a club that was, I suppose, developing youth, and then find myself with a bunch of lads that I've been playing with for a number of years as a youth team player, as a reserve team player, and we all went through together. We got promoted into the championship. That first season of the championship, we finished 4th, and we just had no fear. And I think that comes from being together and being young, and you know, whether you want to call it naive or stupidity, we had no fear. We just went anywhere. We felt we could beat anybody on any pitch. And just had a great time. But I think I didn't realise that changing rooms are not like that everywhere, because I went off to Sheffield and I had a great time at Sheffield, but it was nothing like Millwall. I went to Palace, had a good time at Palace for most of it, but it was nothing like Millwall. And then the only time I found the change room similar was when I came to Wellington later on in my career. But I look back and think how lucky I was to start my career at Millwall with that bunch of people, and obviously to top it off and be able to play in a FA Cup finals. The stuff that dreams are made of, and I talked about it before, but you stand in the tunnel. You've got Roy Keane, Ryan Giggs, Paul Scholes. It's just ridiculous. Cristiano Ronaldo. We didn't know who he was at the time, but obviously he's gone on to do what he's gone on to do. He was the young Portuguese lad. Everybody was talking about Giggs and Van Nistelrooy and guys like that. They weren't talking about Ronaldo until after the final, and he'd been absolutely unbelievable. When obviously he went off on a path to stardom.
What do you put the feel-good factor down to with Millwall at that time? It was the coaching team. Do you think it was a special relationship with the players around the same age, or a combination of all
of that? I think the thing with Billy Bonds gave most of us our first contract, and then he left the club. Then Keith Stevens came in with Alan McCleary and gave most of us younger fellas our first start in the team. And then Mark McGee took that to the next level. And by the time Mark was there, myself, Stephen Reid, Richard Sadler, Neil Harris, we were starting every week, all of us. So it had been built. It's what I talked about before, when you talk about coaching, and it's not just one coach. These coaches had built it. And so all the success that Mark McGee had and Dennis Wise had later on in the FA Cup final was actually built before by Billy Bonds signing us, by Keith Stevens and Alan McCleary giving us our chance, Mark McGee taking that to the next level. Dennis Wise taking that to the next level, and then having a group that could stay together for a number of years. We were quite lucky in that not many of the boys got picked off too early. Normally, you see a group like that come through and they go bang, see you later, off to another club, off to another club. I think Reedy went first. He went to Blackburn along with Lucas Neal, but most of us stayed right up until after the cup final. Timmy went just after the cup final, then I went a year after that. So we had a good period of probably 4 years where there was a real good bunch of us together. But you've also got to say that it wasn't just the playing staff, it was the coaching staff, it was the people in the kitchen, it was the people at the ground, it was the groundsmen, it was the whole place was just built at the time to work and succeed. And then you've got the fans on top of that, absolutely demanding that you give everything every time you turn out, whether it's a under 14 game, whether it's a reserve game, whether it's a first team game. If you put the Millwall shirt on, absolute minimum is 100% work rate.
Wanna, like you said, mention the 2004 FA Cup final and the run as well. Incredible run, and fantastic to see a team from the lower tiers get into the final of the FA Cup. What were the highlights from the team's run before the final for yourself, Bob?
It was a weird one because I think with the FA Cup and even the League Cup, any cups like that, as a lower league team outside the Premier League, you don't expect yourself to be in the latter stages of it. It's almost, we found it the years before that as more of a hindrance, really. You could be going well in the league and then the cup gets in the way. You just want another league game. So I remember we started against Walsall and we ended up beating Walsall. And I think one of our young lads, Kevin Braniff, came on and scored a goal. We managed to sneak through that. And then all of a sudden you're in the fourth round and we were playing Telford, a game you should win, but it was away from home. The pitch was awful. We went up there a couple of times. It was called off. We ended up playing it on an awful pitch. That was the only goal I scored in the cup run, actually. So I scored in that. Dennis Wise scored. All of a sudden, you're at home. You get a home draw against Burnley. But once you get the home draw against Burnley in round 5, you're sort of thinking, we're one away from a quarter final here. And we were above Burnley in the table. We'd beaten them in the league. And it was a good matchup for us. We duly went and won that game. I think Kevin Muscat crossed it for Danny Dicchio header, which he always did. He was top draw at that. And you're in the quarters, and you're thinking, if we get a decent draw here, we have a chance. So no disrespect to them, but everybody wanted Tranmere because Tranmere were the lowest team left in the cup. We get Tranmere at home, so you're thinking, this is it. We can definitely beat Tranmere at home. So we go out, we play, and we play pretty poorly, to be fair. But we're in the game. We get a penalty late on. Kevin Muscat steps up, never misses a pen. Keeper dives. Muskie hits it down the middle, and the keeper gets a great big hand up, saves it, pushes it over the bar. So now we've got to go up to Prenton Park, and obviously back in those days, Tranmere were a massive cup team. They managed to get to the final of the League Cup. They were always in the latter stage of the FA Cup. It was, they stayed in their league, but they always did well in the cup. So we knew we were in for a bit of a tough game, but we went up there, and that's one of probably the best we played in the cup. Neil Harris scores a left foot volley, which is absolutely outrageous. Tim Cahill does what Tim Cahill does and scores a tap in. And we managed to sneak through. It was pretty tight at the end. And again, you go in and you're waiting for the draw, and we're at the training ground together waiting for the draw. And you're looking at it, and it's Man U, Arsenal, Sunderland, and us. And I've spoken to. I was teammates with John Oster later on in my career at Palace, and he was at Sunderland at the time. So Oster, they were in their team room, and they were gagging for us. We were absolutely gagging for them, and bang, we get each other. Man, you get Arsenal, and there's going to be a team outside the Premier League in the final. And I think both teams knew that they weren't going to win the cup, but both teams wanted to make the final and potentially play against either team was a team of superstars. You're getting Thierry Henry or you're getting Ruud van Nistelrooy. You couldn't really ask for more. So the semi-final was a big one for me. Just going up to Old Trafford. I've never played at Old Trafford. Unbelievable stadium. All my family got a bus up there. It was just an amazing experience. And I only ended up playing 30 minutes. I got injured, set up the goal for Timmy, and then got injured in the celebration. I ran after him, tried to go too quickly and tore my groin. So that was the end of me. But I mean, obviously, what an amazing occasion. I remember sitting on the bench the last 20 minutes. It seemed like it went for about an hour. It was ridiculous. We were hanging on, to be fair, and Sunderland were pushing for an equaliser. And I think if they'd have got an equaliser, they'd have beat us in extra time because we'd gone. I'd come off injured. Kevin Muscat had got injured. We were hanging in there a little bit, but that was it. Off to the cup final.
Let's focus on the cup final itself. Historic moment for the club. Fantastic for the players involved as well. I bet the squad's buzzing at that point in time. Regardless of the league or where you are at the moment in the league, everything seems to be forgotten at that one moment, moment.
No, when we got to when we qualified for the cup final, we were fourth in the championship and absolutely flying. We had, I'm not sure on the numbers, but we had about 8 games maybe to go for the end of the season. We won 1, and that was the one before the cup final. We were losing at home to Gillingham and Watford, teams that we dispatched comfortably earlier in the season. But you've just got one eye on the final, and you know you want to play on it. And I look back and think, if we didn't make the cup final, I honestly believe we had a team capable of being promoted to the Premier League that year. But the cup final was in the way, and no matter what you try and do, you're still thinking, no matter what, I want to be fit for the final. I don't want to miss it. I don't want to be out of form. So you're trying to play well, but you're also trying to keep yourself, I suppose, fit and ready. And we just couldn't do both. And we were trying to sort of coast through league games, and it just wasn't quite happening. So as soon as the season finishes, then you've got all the stuff, like you've got the FA Cup song that you've got to record. You've got the suit fittings. You've got getting ready.
I want to focus on the FA Cup song recording.
No, you really don't. You really don't. It's terrible.
Brilliant.
No, it was good fun. It's awful. It's awful. I don't know if it even got bloody released. It shouldn't have done. It was terrible. There's not a singer in our group, that's for sure. But no, going into a studio recording that was brilliant banter. You're doing the suit fittings. Choosing the suit, doing the suit fittings. I've still got the suit somewhere. It was all the fun stuff leading up. And the good thing about it was you had Dennis Wise, who'd played in one before. You got Ray Wilkins, who was our coach as well. He played in numerous. Yeah. And they just kept us level, and they kept saying to us, the sort of message was, it's just 11 guys. It's 11 guys just like you. Yes, they play at a higher level, but if you catch them on the day and you do the right things, the things we're asking you to do, who knows? You could go there and cause an upset. And the plan basically was to get to half time 0-0. And then have a right go second half, because we didn't want to go there and get beat 7-0 in the cup final. It was embarrassing. So the plan was 0-0. If we felt that if we had a go at them second half, they might get a couple of goals, but they're never going to wallop us. And unfortunately, partly due to my fault, we went in 1-0 down at half time because Ronaldo scored a header bang on 45 minutes really.
Can you remember what Dennis Wise said to rally you guys up before kickoff? So I know you just mentioned you went down 1-0 down. The game plan, obviously, to keep it really tight and then try to dog them out in the second half. But can you remember the words he sort of used to inspire you guys or rally you guys?
No, he didn't need to. He really, Dennis was good. He knew what we needed and when we needed it, and Ray was the same. But if you can't get up for a FA Cup final, you shouldn't be there. And I think he felt that, and he could look around the room, and we were focused, we were ready, we were pretty relaxed considering who we were going out to play. And just before we went out, Ray came in with a tray of whiskey, and we all had a shot of whiskey before we went out and played. And it was just perfect. You didn't really need to say anything. We just had a little sip, and it was like, right, here we go. And for 44 minutes, we were probably equal to Manchester United. Probably at the time one of the best sides in the whole of Europe, maybe the world. And we were their equals. And it was only when they got a corner and we didn't clear it properly, and it got whipped back in by, I think, Gary Neville. He flipped, hung it up to the back stick, and Ronaldo came in and did what he does over and over again now. But like I said, at the time, we didn't know. And he jumps out the flipping building, downward header, 1-0. And then the second half, they get a penalty, which is, if you watch it today, wouldn't be a pen. It would get reversed on VAR. And the third goal was actually offside. Van Nistelrooy was offside. And again, would have been reversed on VAR. I mean, I'm probably clutching a little bit, but 1-0 might have looked a little bit better than 3-0.
How many times have you thought about those 3 goals in your head as a player? You relive moments in your life, sometimes something will flash into your head. How many times has that come back to you?
The first one for me, because the first goal, if you get a chance,
really high, that one when he leaped in the air.
Yeah. But the worst part about it was I was supposed to be marking him from corners. Now, if we know what we know now, you'd never ever in a million years put me on him for corners, right? But we cleared the corner, and if you slow things down, I'm standing next to Ronaldo out wide on the right. And the ball gets swung out to the other side, and Neville gets it. And as he flicks it up to the back post, Ronaldo leaves me and starts running. And I realise too late. So I go running after him and I can't quite catch him. And in hindsight, I should have just shouted to Wisey, who was closest, just to head it. I don't say anything because I'm still chasing. And then as it comes across, Ronaldo's up. And by that point, it's too late. But I just think back, shit, why didn't I grab him? Why didn't I speak to Wisey? Why didn't I just run with him? I mean, look, probably if I ran with him and tried to jump with him, he still out jumps me and still scores, and I look like a tit anyway. But in my heart of hearts, I would have loved to have just ran with him and tried to defend the header, maybe. That one gets me, because I think if we get in at 0-0, you never know. You know, you can defend well and get a fluky 30-yarder from somebody. Tim Cahill scores a header from a corner, which he always did, and all of a sudden you win the cup. I mean, again, I might be clutching, but that does go through your head, and you think. And I know David Livermore's the same. He made the tackle for the penalty, and if you actually slow it down, he just about touches the ball. Actually, Michael Silvestre made a similar tackle on me, and we didn't get the penalty. And that was first half, which would have been, an opportunity to go 1-0 up. And like you said, the third one, probably irrelevant, because at that point we weren't going to get back in the game, but it was definitely offside pretty comfortably as well. But, I look back and I've got great memories of playing against some of the best in the world at the time.
This is a moment where Ronaldo really transitioned. He became more of a complete footballer rather than someone that was doing tricks in the wrong area of the pitch when he first signed for United. Did you know there and then, after that game, that you'd played against someone special and potentially a once-in-a-generational talent in Cristiano Ronaldo?
I don't think I did. I felt that about Giggs, and I felt that about Keane. I thought they were guys that, would be tough to surpass. I looked at Ronaldo. I agree with what you said there. I think he, a lot of the time, did tricks in wrong areas. He'd do a step over 5 meters away from you, and you'd be thinking, well, if you do that a little bit closer and you go past somebody, then that's different. But in that cup final, he started showing glimpses of what he could do. I thought he would go on to be very good. I don't think I ever thought he'd go on to be, this argument between him and Messi. For me, Messi's still the best, but Ronaldo's certainly number 2, and one of the best that has ever played the game. So no, I didn't think he'd go on to do that, but I did think he was going to make a big impact at United, and obviously he duly did, and then got his move, and he's certainly never looked back. He's been magnificent.
I know it's a silly question, but what was the mood like after you guys suffered defeat to Manchester United? Bearing in mind, it probably is a game that, as much as your squad is a fantastic squad, it's a game you're huge underdogs for. But what was the mood like amongst the players, and how did everything go down after the game?
Yeah, it was a little weird. We came in and we had a little bit of a team talk, and Ray and Dennis just said that they were proud of us, and that was quite emotional, really. We'd just been beat 3-0. If we'd been beaten 3-0 in any league game at any time, Wisey and Ray would have been absolutely ripping into us. So it's kind of odd that they were giving us a bit, but I think they knew that we really tried to stick to the game plan. We'd given everything we had, and we just weren't as good as them. That was the long and short of it. We got them on a pretty good day, and they played well, and we'd given our all. So once we'd done that, the boys were talking about who they'd swap shirts with and stuff like that, and then we just got on with it. We had an aftermatch in a nice hotel with all our friends and family, a few speeches and that, and everybody talked about the season, and that was it. And then off you go, and it's weird because we didn't know what was coming next, so we all get the bus home, and when we get there, we get to the main ground, the Den, and the chairman comes in and said, right, we're going out on a open top bus now. And I remember all the boys going, oh my God, this is going to be so embarrassing. There's going to be like one man and his dog turn up. No one's going to care. We didn't even win. And then you start off on the bus route, mate, there was people everywhere. It was absolutely ridiculous. And that's one of the things I really do remember, how many people obviously went to the cup final, but then got back as well, and were happy to come out and see us. We'd just been beat 3-0, but it wasn't about that. It was more the fact that we'd given everything, and we'd given them a day out, their first FA Cup final, and also we'd actually qualified for Europe. So for them, they saw it as a win. It was, it was completely different feeling. And yeah, the open top bus was magnificent. Great day.
I think the fact that you guys, through sort of getting to the FA Cup final, qualified for Europe is a massive thing. Sometimes that fact is downplayed, just how big of an achievement that is for Millwall at that time in the club's history.
Yeah, no, fun. It was fun. It was different. It was something I never thought. I thought you had to be in the Premier League to go and play in Europe. It was never ever thought about. And all of a sudden, we're talking about who we might draw in the UEFA Cup. And we didn't really get a glamour tie, I have to say. It was Ferencváros of Hungary. But again, it was a game that we probably thought we might have a chance of getting through. And then you get into the group. So back in those days, it was 5-team groups. And we just thought, what's the worst that can happen? You get three away trips all around Europe. So we were gagging to go through, and we drew at home and probably should have won. First up, Wisey scored a free kick. I think we drew 1-1, and we went away and we lost 1-0. I think it was in the end. But a game we should have definitely got something out of, which was pretty disappointing. But I think it kind of got in the way of that season. Everything was geared up towards Europe, and we didn't really take hold in the league, and we just never really got going. I think we ended up finishing maybe around 10th or something like that, and it was a little bit disappointing that we let it sort of take, I suppose, precedence. But it was hard not to. Again, a club from the Championship playing in Europe was just unheard of, really.
We spoke a little bit about Manchester United as well, but I think it's only fair that we talk about some of the quality that Millwall had in the team that season and indeed the season after. The likes of Lucas Neal, the likes of Tim Cahill, Neil Harris. Can we focus a little bit on Tim Cahill? Give us a little insight into what he was like day in, day out around the club.
Yeah, so me and Timmy, like I said, we turned up on the same day. So obviously I've come up from Brighton, he's come from Australia, and although we're from poles apart, we sort of hit the ground running together as mates, because it was us sort of versus them to start with. The youth team boys didn't want either of us in the squad. We hadn't proved ourselves as players or people or anything, so we hung around together, and we got on, and we were thick as thieves, and we were out eating fried chicken at Morley's night before games, and in the pool hall, and that's just what we did, and we had a good time doing it, and we stuck together. And the thing about him, he's not the best footballer I've played with, but in terms of his mindset, I've never met anybody like him. In terms of how confident he was in his own ability and what he could achieve, it doesn't surprise me that he's got 100 odd caps and he's the top scorer for Australia and he's played in the Premier League. In his mind, he was always going to do that. That was just a given. I was different. I was always struggling with my mindset and was I good enough to be there? And he never had that. Certainly not that I saw. He was always going to be a Premier League player. It was just a matter of time. He saw Millwall as the next step in his progression to go to wherever he was going to go to. And when he went to Everton, I remember speaking to him after he'd been there a week, and he said, like, it's more difficult, it's tougher, but he said, I'm going to be all right. He said, I'll score goals. He said, I'll score goals wherever I go. And he always has.
Do you think that lack of determination in yourself comes from being released at sort of 15, 16? It's such an imperative age for a young man or a young player to have that knockback at that age. Do you feel that was in the back of your mind, even as you're
possibly
an adult?
Yeah, possibly. I mean, I was a sort of player that needed love from a coach. If a coach loved me and told me that I was good, I believed him. If a coach didn't show me the love and didn't tell me I was very good, I thought I wasn't very good. So I always struggled with confidence. And I think I look at my career, and if you look at the numbers, the stats, you can pretty much see who I was playing for and the relationship I had with them. And that's why I was so productive under Mark McGee. I was pretty productive under Neil Warnock, certainly for the Championship season, not so much in the Premier League. And then I was really productive when I came out to Wellington. But all those coaches just showed me love, told me that I could win games for them and that I was important. And so, whether that's right or wrong or whether that's my own mindset, I don't know. But I look at it and think, if I'd have been shown that love all the way through my career, I think I'd have scored a lot more goals. I'd have played in a lot more bigger games. I might have had a better career. I mean, it's great knowing now, but it's a little bit too late. But I think I try and make sure that I coach in a similar fashion, and that it doesn't matter how old you are. Everybody wants a little bit of love at some point. You want to feel wanted, and I think if you can pass that on as a coach now, you've got a great chance of getting the people you're working with to work with you, not for you, but with you.
Played over 200 games for Millwall. Big part of the club's history, a big part of your life and your career. Was it a tough decision for you to leave the club when Sheffield United put in a big a big offer for you to come and join their ranks?
Yeah, I didn't want to leave. So the season finished, and Jeff Burnage, who was, I think he was at the time chief executive, he pulled me in the office and said, "Look, the club have had a bid from Sheffield United. We're selling you." And I said, "What do you mean we're selling? I don't want to leave." And he said to me, "Look, the club need the money. You've got to go." And I was in the office in tears. I said, "Look, I do not want to leave this football. I love it here." In my mind, coming through the youth system, I just felt like I'd be there forever. That was my club. I wasn't going to go anywhere. I didn't need to. I sort of thought we'll get to the Premier League at some point with this squad. And for him to be telling me that it was the end and that he was going to be selling the so-called better players, that was that. So I kind of was forced out, really. And I remember at the time being a little bit pissed off because I remember the fans were giving me pouters that I'd asked for a transfer, which was absolutely not true. I didn't want to go at all. And at the time, I didn't personally think that Sheffield United's squad was any better than Millwall's squad. When I got there, I realised how good their squad was, and it was as good, maybe better. And quickly realised that we had a really good opportunity to go to the Premier League, which we duly did. But yeah, certainly I didn't want to go. Like you said, I've been there seven years and had some great times, met some great people. So it was a wrench to leave, but looking back on it now, it was the right decision because of the way the club was set up. By the time I left, it just fell apart, and unfortunately, that season Millwall got relegated, and obviously took a little bit of time to get themselves back up to where they belonged.